pick off of each other. So I guess we'll
Sure.
just do that. And nobody expects it to be perfect. We're not perfect. So I'm ready when you are, sister.
Hit it.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Wanted to go ahead and post another video. Hopefully everyone is doing a fairly good job of taking care of themselves and their family during these tumultuous times in our country. We're fighting quite a few pandemics at this point. So the purpose of this video is to discuss the elephant in the room. And by elephant in the room, I mean mental health. And so I have my sister with me today, and she is actually a mental health therapist. So I'll give her the opportunity to tell you a little more about her.
All right. Hi, Kishi.
There's your screen is frozen.
Yours is.
Oh my God. Now yours is not frozen.
Yeah, yours is. Okay. Anyway, hello. Hi. From very hot and humid Richmond, Virginia. So, as my sister mentioned, I have practiced as a mental health therapist, yes. But my education is clinical social work. I have a master's from NYU, and then I've been licensed for the last 12, 13 years now. I can't believe. Oof. In that time, my primary focus has been, as Keisha mentioned, mental health. It is beyond the elephant in the room. It's like the elephant's foot on our neck. Like it is. I think the key word people forget is health, and it is part of your overall health. It's taking care of your emotions, your mental state. Your emotional state, your mental, faculties, your cognition. All those things encompass mental, and your behaviors. All that encompasses mental health, and that's been my work for the last 17 years. I, for the last 6 or 7 years, have worked in the medical social work field. So I've gotten to really see how our physical health and mental health are so intertwined. If you are not taking care of one, the other usually falls. And I work for a major insurance company. I would say 85–90% of the people that I wind up talking to or talking about also have a major medical issue along with their major, we say, behavioral health issue. And behavioral health encompasses kind of the typical mental health things you think of, like depression, to the more severe psychotic things like schizophrenia, but also substance abuse. Also, those impulsive behaviors that we have that kind of get us into those depressive and anxious states. So that's been my focus for almost half my life now. And
Thank you, Iris. Yeah. Speaking of anxiety and stress, I was thinking back to my 19-year-old self when I had Maria, and I was just, it's like you're in a daze because it's so much. You have to take in so much. You're processing everything the medical professionals are telling you, or at least I was. I was also mourning the typical development of my baby at the time. And so I got into this mode where most of Maria's younger years were just about getting through the day. And it was very unhealthy. And so I definitely am grateful, Eris, that you took the time to come on here and talk about the need for balance, because as a caregiver, being a parent anyway is very stressful, even with typical development. But when you have everything that goes into raising a special needs child, whether it's attention deficit or whether you're on the other end of the spectrum, it's stressful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what you talked about, the grieving. So you told me this, we were going to talk about mental health and as parents of kids with special needs, or sometimes I say extra needs or different challenges. But I know I guess to share a little bit about my personal life intersecting the professional, I have a son who is on the autism spectrum, as you well know, your nephew.
Yes.
And he is the light of my life, that there is no one who has simultaneously delighted and exhausted me at the same time like my child.
Yeah, and by
Yeah.
the way, when my sister was pregnant, I told her, I said, being a parent is the most amazing, yet the most overrated job ever.
She did. She did. It is something everyone, it's kind of the opposite of the news, right? It's something almost everyone talks about the joys of, but never the pitfalls. Like
Exactly.
yeah, we don't hear all
Exactly.
the negative things. And I won't even say negative, but we don't hear the other side of it. So while there is joy at hearing the first word, watching steps if you're so lucky, we don't hear the other
All the
half.
stuff that comes with it.
Exactly.
Which is why it's so
Exactly.
important to have a support system, to have a
Yes.
counselor, a life coach, an excellent sister like I have. I mean,
Likewise.
it's clutch to have that
Yeah,
help.
exactly. I agree completely. So you and I have talked many times about our different challenges with our respective children. Um, and I learned so much from watching you. When you said to have that support, that is like my number one thing. But actually, I'm sorry, let me back up. My number one thing is what you mentioned a while ago, which was when you cried about the typical development you would be expecting. That's why we call it typical. So I kind of came up with these 3 G's, right? And my first G is grieve,
Grieve.
to help
Okay, let
yourself.
me write this down.
um, it's not what you expect. It's not at all what you're expecting. So you're gonna have to allow yourself the space to grieve those expectations, to grieve the experiences you're not going to have, to just grieve the news overall and think about how that's going to affect your child's life, much less your own. Um, is normal. It should be expected. It's unfortunately not. A lot of times we, like you mentioned, have to immediately get into that role of advocate and voice for a child. Um, but allow yourself the initial grief and understand it's not just one time. It's going to go on throughout their life because they change,
Yes.
standards change, needs change. So there's always going to be some new grief that you will have. Yeah.
That's a great point, Eris, because, as we expect our typical children to hit those milestones, some of our special needs babies, they don't hit those milestones,
Right.
or they're very delayed in hitting those milestones to the point where the age gap might be extreme. So yeah, I used to self-soothe, just FYI. People used to ask me all the time when Maria was younger, oh, well, what are you gonna do when she gets bigger? What are you gonna do when things get worse? And I didn't know how to answer that. It was enough just to get through the day. But
Exactly.
I told myself, and I don't know where I came up with this number, but in my head, Maria was going to be typical by age 7. I saw her walking, I saw her talking. Don't know where I
Interesting.
came up with that, but that's what I did to get myself through the day.
I like that. So it's kind of setting yourself different goals, goalposts at least. Like, okay, at this time we're going to see, and maybe reassess. And that's a lot of grieving. That's a lot of what it is let me just get to the next step. We've all heard of the different stages of grief. I mean, I think that's true, but they're never in any particular order. So,
That's true.
and part of what you're talking about is maybe the bargaining thing that people mention, Are you there with me?
I am here, yes.
Oh, okay. The bargaining, like, okay, by 7 she'll be walking, she'll be talking, things will get better. I can just make it to age 7. And for me personally, it was, okay, let's just make it till school age, till 5. I bet he'll grow out of it, you know. And it wasn't that at all. At all. So I understand that completely. And that's why I say grief is number 1. My number 2 thing is part of what you talked about as well, which is gather. Information is key. And let me tell you, it's power. Knowledge is power. It's an old thing because it's true. Now, when Maria was born, Google was not a thing.
No.
So, but I just remember you asking questions, getting, okay, where can I go for this? How can she get that service? How do we get daycare paid for? Who's the doctor who's going to help with this issue and that issue? I mean, and it's still ongoing. I watch you every day almost do this. But that's what I mean by gather. Knowledge is power. Sometimes it can be overwhelming.
Yes.
But really, the more you know about whatever your child's specific condition is, you're going to be better armed to interact with these people. A lot of times, unfortunately, we live in this country where we don't have a great healthcare setup. And I'll say that working for an insurance company, we don't. But if you can go in armed with just a couple of questions that will lead to a conversation and take you in a way that maybe the doctor or specialist or social caseworker is not expecting, I think usually the better the outcome, because they know that you're someone who's invested, right? Like you're not someone who's just there because Susie social worker said I had to come see you. You know, like you want the best for your child. And most parents really do. It's just that it becomes hard, which leads me to the 3rd G for me, which is group.
Yes.
And another word for that is community. You need to find the people who can support you. I have my sister, my family in general. My son has a wonderful father. We have found numerous autism support groups in our area, in the nation. There are gyms, there are playrooms, there are camps. I mean, there are things out there if you are able to find them, but I always recommend to somebody, just Google the condition and support group. 9.5 times out of 10, you will find one.
Right.
At least that you can call into or go online and find. Because support is everything. No man is an island, as we say. And you have to have your group behind you. And unfortunately, some people have families who don't support them. We don't have that issue. But there are people who are going through what you're going through.
Absolutely. And that is why we are doing this. That is why we have Family Affair on Facebook. That is why I've recorded these videos. If it helps anybody out there, then it is totally worth it, just one person. I know how hard it is to put your business out there, to join other people and say, hey, just to ask for help is hard. Just to let someone into your life is hard. But there really are people out here who understand the struggle. And you're always better with company because you're not alone. And even if you just have a sounding board where someone listens to you, and you can use acronyms for equipment or for therapists or even for the condition, just talking to someone that understands that, it goes a long way. So
it
please,
does. You're not expending that extra energy going, well, I know how many times I've heard, well, aren't all kids a little autistic? Or, but he's an only child, but he's a boy, but.
Right.
To talk to someone who's been in that same situation is priceless. Yeah.
It is. Absolutely, sis. Great advice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You coming on here and talking to us today. That was very helpful. So the 3 G's, grieve, gather, and group. Thank you so much, Miss LCSW.
Okay, Miss, what is it? MED, MS?
I
MA,
don't even know.
BA. So many initials she can't keep track.
But we appreciate you all joining us today, and I'll let my sister say goodbye, but I thank you, and I hope you all take care of each other and continue to do the work because it's worth it.
All right. Thank you so much, Keisha. It was a pleasure always talking to you.
Have a good night, sis.
Good night.